What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the top 5 of my 2021 NFL Deep Dive series. Today, we reveal the Buffalo Bills. Before we get into the Bills here, please do hit that like button down below. Really does help me out. Also, if you enjoy the video, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss any of the remaining deep dives as we count down to number 1. So the Buffalo Bills coming in at number 5. This was really one of the surprise emerging teams from the 2020 season, and that was headlined by the breakout of their young, now star quarterback Josh Allen, who just got the bag, all of the money from the Buffalo Bills to be their franchise quarterback here. But now heading into 2021, they're looking to sustain that success that they built up from last year while continuing to improve upon some of their shortcomings from last year that did have them fall just short of that ultimate goal of the Super Bowl. So in this video, we're going to dive into the roster. We're going to rank each position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league. But we're also going to talk as we go about some of the key, more pivotal players on this roster that could ultimately decide whether this team can take that last step towards being a Super Bowl champion, which is the, I would say, justified goal for this team. I don't want to say they're Super Bowl or bust because they have a lot of positivity for the future with Josh Allen here, but it would be a disappointment, I think, for the Bills internally and for their fans if they do not win the Super Bowl this year. So let's go ahead and get into it. I want to start with their offseason that was really much more about some of that sustainability, was much more focused on retaining some of their core players, guys like Matt Milano and, right tackle Darrell Williams and obviously Josh Allen. Really focusing on retaining some of their own homegrown talent and even into the draft, looking ahead a little bit more, kind of looking at the trenches, maybe some guys that won't be such big contributors this year, but hopefully will develop into key players. But as far as free agency goes and stuff, this team has been very active over the last few years. This year was a change of pace. It was much more of like, all right, we've got our talent, so let's keep it in-house. But that doesn't mean they didn't do anything here. If you look at the key departures, key additions, they're basically going to be swapping out John Brown for Emmanuel Sanders. We'll talk about what Sanders can bring to this team when we get to the receiving grade. They are going to lose Trent Murphy, but replacing it with a couple of other bigger-bodied edge guys in the draft, Gregory Rousseau and Carlos Basham. They are going to lose Quentin Jefferson, a pass-rushing interior piece there, but getting Star Lotulelei back from the opt-out last year, and then letting veteran cornerback Josh Norman go. So a pretty, modest offseason, if you will. Not a whole lot of moving pieces. This is more or less last year's team hoping to continue to develop and grow as a unit. So let's go ahead and get into the roster, starting with the quarterback, where they are going to rank 4th in the league. And you can make a pretty strong case that Josh Allen was actually the 3rd best quarterback in the NFL last season. And that really took the league by storm and frankly made a lot of people look really foolish. And, I'm a Josh Allen guy. He was my number 2 quarterback coming out. I remember going against the grain saying, don't worry so much about the completion percentage. He'll work on his game. He'll develop. He'll get there. But even me, last year coming into the 2020 season, it was impossible to completely ignore the inaccuracy that he had shown and the decision-making stuff. He just constantly trying to turn the ball over, it felt like. And last year was a huge year for him to weed those things out. And he did. He showed tremendous development. Now pairing what to me is the most physically gifted quarterback to ever enter the NFL. And it sounds hyperbolic, but I do genuinely believe that. You look at the combination of his size, speed, and strength paired with his arm talent that to me is the strongest arm in the NFL now and of all time. Again, sounds hyperbolic, but when you really watch him play, the scene in the Avengers when the Hulk is just whipping Loki around like a rag doll? That is how I feel watching Josh Allen throw a football. It's just different, and that's not a slight to Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers and, Dan Marino back in the day. It's just different with Josh Allen. This guy throws a 55-yard post route like most quarterbacks throw a slant. And the ball, the velocity, it's just unlike anything I've ever seen. So you pair that now with the development and the growth as a processor and with his accuracy that many people didn't see coming, and at this time last year felt like it just might not get there. Well, it gets there. Sure, it might not be an elite processor for Josh Allen quite yet. He might not have elite accuracy, but it is good and not bad like it has been in years past. But you still get those occasional Josh Allen moments. You'll still get some missed throws in there relative to the elite of the elite accuracy guys. But now he's just a good processor and he has good accuracy paired now with those all-time elite traits. And that's when you get a top 4 quarterback. You get a quarterback capable of an MVP caliber season like we saw last year. Just happened to be in a crazy COVID season where Mahomes and Rodgers also had insane numbers. But everything has started to come together for Josh Allen. It's been super fun to watch. And everyone wants to say, okay, well, the regression is coming. Look at what he was in the first 2 years. Look at what he was in college. He's going to go back to being that guy. And you'd be really dumb to not admit that that is a possibility. And I agree, it could happen. There were still some moments last year where you're scratching your head saying, oh no, don't do that, Josh. But he cut down on those so much, and the processing became so much better, paired with what you see and what everybody says is just elite work ethic and work behavior and leadership there. The narrative to me should be much more about like, okay, what if he continues to develop like he did, which there's very little reason to believe he won't. There's no reason Josh Allen can't continue to develop the processing, the decision-making, and the accuracy, and become the best quarterback in the NFL and continue to grow, as opposed to the narrative that I think a lot of people want to happen, which is, okay, he's going to fall back to earth. He's going to go back to being the same guy that I hated coming out of Wyoming. Again, regression is possible here. It was one huge season for Josh Allen that was unlike his first 2 years. But there's a lot of reasons to believe as well that this is only the beginning of Josh Allen, and that's certainly what the Bills and McDermott and these guys think is coming here in Buffalo. So I would just say that for any Bills fans that think 4th is too low and you think he should be QB3, if you think he's higher than that, I do think you're crazy. I would just say it was one amazing season. Hopefully he continues to show the things he showed last year, and then we can put him ahead of Russell Wilson, who's been doing this kind of stuff for 3 or 4 years, is basically what it comes down to for me. But if you're a Josh Allen hater, just stop. We get to watch, to me, the most gifted quarterback of all time in Josh Allen. We have Lamar Jackson, who's probably the best running quarterback, or at least best dual threat quarterback in 20 years or more. And we get Patrick Mahomes, who's just an absolute magician. The quarterbacks that we get to watch every Sunday, it's just enjoy it. And I can't wait to see Josh Allen come out again, and certainly one of the most fun quarterbacks to watch in the entire NFL. And not just fun, he is a legitimately great quarterback that is the reason this team ranks in the top 5 in the league, and a reason this team has real, legitimate Super Bowl aspirations, and certainly a reason they paid him $43 million to continue to be this guy. So it's a good time to be a Bills fan. Anytime you have a quarterback with the future outlook of a Josh Allen, you just sit back and enjoy it. Behind him, they bring in Mitch Trubisky as a reclamation project. I'm not going to talk about Mitch Trubisky in this video here, but he's there. We'll see. Jake Fromm, who I think can be a really high-end backup. I like his accuracy, his processing, his decision-making. Underrated play extender as well. I like Jake Fromm coming out a lot. Probably was just overrating his arm talent that apparently is just absolutely bottom tier bad, because that is the only way that can explain why he was a 5th-round pick and why he's not even the backup quarterback here. But I'm still intrigued by the career of Jake Fromm. But this is all about Josh Allen. If they have to go to Mitch Trubisky, well, we've seen how that goes. Let's move on to the running back here, where they're going to rank 24th. And, this team really leans on the passing game, and it's a good position group to not rank all that highly. But let's be honest, this is not all that great of a running game with the running backs here in the offensive line that we'll talk about. You have 2 low-end starters, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. neither of these guys are physically dominant players. They don't have that fear factor, explosiveness to their game. Singletary, a much smaller player with some craftiness, some shiftiness, great contact balance, underrated speed, but just, again, not someone you're afraid of. Andy really struggles in the receiving game with drops. I think he's 11 drops in the last 2 years. You get Zach Moss in there, who is much more sure-handed and a bigger player, maybe not quite as quick, but brings a nice kind of thunder and lightning approach in some ways, but again, not a physically gifted player. They do have Matt Breida there, who is incredibly fast, and when he's been on the field, he's looked like a pretty good explosive running back. That has been an issue for him. Injuries have really compounded for him, but he does give them potentially a more explosive big play threat in certain running looks, be it outside zone or draw plays, screens and stuff, but also in the receiving game, he is a more capable receiving back than these guys, and we'll talk about them when we get to the receiving grade as a whole. But there's your 3 running backs. It is what it is. This team clearly not investing all that much outside of a couple mid-round picks on this group, and they're fine with that. We saw games last year where Brian Daboll was like, we don't need to run the ball. Let's pass the ball 25 straight times. They're a very modern thinking offense, and they're perfectly fine with that. Antonio Williams is the 4th running back there. He all right. Played week 17 last year, looked pretty good. And I don't even feel like talking about the rest of the guys, so let's move on. Next, we have the receiving grade here that is going to come in 8th in the NFL. It's a really deep, versatile, well-rounded group of receivers here. This is a huge part of getting Josh Allen really up to speed and developing his game, was giving him weapons like this, and I expect that to continue into 2021. You have Stephon Diggs, who I did my wide receiver tier rankings video, and I put him in that top tier with Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, and DeAndre Hopkins. There's nothing Stephon Diggs can't do. He has elite route running. He has elite release. He is a high-end athlete and run-after-catch threat, and he attacks the football vertically extremely well with the best of them in the league. He's one of the better contested catch receivers in the league because of how well he attacks the football and elevates and sticks his arms out to go get it. The only knock on Stephon Diggs is health. He's really missed a couple games every season throughout his career, and maybe that continues. But when he's out there, you have a true alpha, elite, top-tier wide receiver who, frankly, doesn't get enough credit for being in that same group. And then as your other kind of perimeter player, because Cole Beasley is such an exclusive slot player for 11 personnel, you've got Emmanuel Sanders and you've got Gabriel Davis. Now, I just don't have very high expectations for Emmanuel Sanders. I do think he's slowing down. He's had a harder time staying healthy. He's a nice route runner at this stage. I wouldn't even say he's a great route runner, but he can separate. He's still super tough over the middle of the field, and I think he has a decent season, but I really, if you want to talk about fantasy football, I'm not touching Emmanuel Sanders. There's not going to be any consistency there. He's going to be better as a locker room guy and as a third down target than I think as this super productive elite elevator of the offense, but he's a nice piece to have. Then you do have Cole Beasley in the slot, who is in the conversation currently for the best pure slot receiver in the league. Just has strangely seemingly gotten faster as his career has gone on and become more of a vertical threat. Not like lining up on the outside, running 9 routes and beating press and stacking corners on the outside, but more so getting schemed up on crossing routes and running away from D-backs over the middle of the field. So that's been a nice evolution in Cole Beasley's game, and I think what's taken him from just kind of typical, really short route-oriented receiver to an explosive slot option is up there in age, and you hope that speed continues to show. What is he now, 32, 33 years old? But he really was an underrated aspect of this offense, and I don't see too many reasons why that won't continue into next season. Then you have Gabriel Davis, who he's going to challenge Emmanuel Sanders for a lot of reps, I do believe. He is kind of an ideal perimeter third receiver for this offense, a guy that can beat press off the line of scrimmage with enough speed to stack on the outside, good ball skills, kind of in that Mike Williams tree stylistically of a good perimeter number 2 receiver. So that was a great pick by the Bills, and I think letting John Brown go, Gabriel Davis being here was a big part of that. So imagine him kind of long-term filling into that role with a great mentor in Emmanuel Sanders. You have your gimmick playmaker type in Isaiah McKenzie, and Marquez Stevenson just pair speed with Josh Allen's arm talent. Now that Josh Allen has developed, the Bills are going to be able to take some dice rolls on speed like Marquez Stevenson. Has had a nice preseason, so we'll keep an eye on him. You got Aaron Rodgers' butt buddy there and Jake Kumaro competing with Isaiah Hodgins maybe for a 7th wide receiver spot if they want to keep 7. I loved Hodgins coming out, ball skills, underrated route running, but like legit 4.7 speed, which is just really hard to play in the NFL, maybe due for a tight end conversion down the road. But I liked his skill set, but just not the athleticism you look for. Duke Williams has had some moments here, but it's really about those top 5 guys and then an open competition for the 6th spot. At tight end, keep an eye here on Dawson Knox. I do have him flagged potentially for a breakout season. I liked him as a prospect, and I think they got excellent value when they drafted him. He has been splitting starting reps with Tyler Kroft, who's been here, and now he's gone. So it's really leaning now on Dawson Knox to kind of put up or shut up here. Are you going to be just a decent number 2 tight end, a good athlete who's a great blocker but just doesn't have much separation or just skill set as a receiver? Or are you going to take that step up and start running better routes and becoming a more bigger focal point of the offense? I'm interested to see. He's always been underutilized. Going back to his time at college, was just kind of a forgotten man in that offense with DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown. Honestly, fair. But now here in the NFL, getting a starting tight end opportunity, let's see it from Dawson Knox. Definitely the potential is there, the athleticism, but just not a huge track record of dominant receiver play there. The tight end depth is lackluster. You have Jacob Hollister, who's been a decent backup for Seattle, okay receiver. Tommy Sweeney, young developmental, balanced tight end. Quentin Morris was a nice undrafted pickup, a good athlete, a young player out of Bowling Green. Just kind of a raw developmental style prospect there. But there's your tight end room. Outside of Dawson Knox, you're not expecting a whole lot, but there is some potential there for Dawson Knox to really grow and become, I would say he just has top 10 potential with his athletic traits and some of the flashes that he's shown. But then you get to the running back room here that's really just going to be this big, honestly, ugly rotation, in my opinion. Not that it's terrible, but it's just not exciting. You know, Devin Singletary, decent with the ball in his hands, but just can't catch the ball. And part of that might be, I bet he has just tiny hands because he's like 5'7", so that could just be a part of his game. Zach Moss next to him, just not an explosive player, but has some power and fluidity in space for a bigger guy. Matt Breida has the route running and the speed you look for, but how much is he going to be healthy? And that's really all you're getting from those running backs. Maybe Williams continues to grow. Maybe Kareth White makes the team, who's shown some nice things as strictly a receiving back, but just not expecting a ton outside of a good screen game here in Buffalo. So that is going to give you the 8th ranked receiving core. You got a lot of options and room for growth as well with guys like Davis and Knox. And then on to the offensive line. That's just a good average group, in my opinion. You have a great tackle duo with Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams. You got Dawkins at left tackle, who is just a high-end starter of a left tackle, someone you don't have to worry about. He has developed so nicely in his technique. Pretty sure he just got a big contract last year, well-deserved. Darrell Williams at right tackle gets paid this offseason. Now, I think their draft tells you a little bit about how they feel about Darrell Williams' long-term outlook here, because he's just not a super high-end player. He does have choppier feet and can struggle with some of the more speedy rushers in the NFL, and they drafted some really high-end upside tackles with guys like Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle. I think long-term, they might be looking and thinking of more of a long-term high-upside tackle there, but for now, you have a high-end starter at right tackle. I don't want to act like Darrell Williams isn't a really good player, because he is. He has great anchor. He's an outstanding run blocker. He's just a super strong, smart player, but again, just struggles with some of the quickness at times. And then you look inside, and it's not that great, to be honest. You know, Mitch Morse at center is just a good, balanced veteran, nothing more, nothing less. Little better of a pass protector than a run blocker. Not worried about that. But you do have John Feliciano at left guard, who's an excellent run blocker and a fan favorite here because he is a guy that will have like highlight reel blocks, just a badass off the line guy that wants to bury dudes in the run game, but just not a refined pass protector. So keep that in mind. Pass protection there with Feliciano, just not a strength. Cody Ford at right guard. The idea of him is nice, but he has not been the player that many experts thought he would be as a nice second-round pick for this team. Now, he's had a hard time staying healthy. He's changed positions, and maybe this is the year that things click into place, but that is a potential weak link at right guard there in Cody Ford. And, they have some options as far as depth is concerned. You got Butker and Lamp. Butker's a decent veteran and an emergency guy that can play that honestly might be a better pass protector than Cody Ford just in general. So maybe in an emergency you go to him, but that's not ideal. Forrest Lamp is another guy that just has not lived up to his potential at all. This team likes their reclamation projects. They believe in the way they can develop players. They are the poster child for that with what they've done with Josh Allen. So hoping to do that maybe with Forrest Lamp, who's a super high upside guard with a ton of athleticism, but again, just hasn't really stayed healthy and certainly didn't work out for the Chargers. Someone to keep an eye on there, but at this point, banking on anything from Forrest Lamp is extremely unlikely. And then Jordan Devey, probably the backup center there, if you ask me. Maybe Jack Anderson, who I thought was a great pass protector and then just ran around at the Senior Bowl. So I had certainly some second thoughts about Jack Anderson after diving a little bit deeper into him because he graded out well as a pass protector at Texas Tech, but you watch him and his technique and it just wasn't there. So the offensive line, it's not a weakness for this team, but it's not a true strength either. It's one of those offensive lines that will allow this team to do what they want to do, but it doesn't necessarily help them do what they want to do. If they want to pass the ball vertical, Josh Allen kind of needs to buy some time. And in the run game, like I said, it's just not a very good running team in general. But you pair all of this talent with what to me is the 7th best offensive coaching staff in the league, led by Brian Daboll, who I don't know for the life of me why he didn't get a head coach offer. Now, some of those were like the Eagles and the Texans. He didn't want those jobs. But a team like the Chargers, I thought would have been after him. Some other openings. Was surprised to see him return to Buffalo, but that was one of the biggest wins for the Bills this offseason was retaining Brian Daboll, because the conversation for the last 2 months of the season was, will this offense look the same when Brian Daboll leaves and becomes the highest paid coach in this hiring cycle? And it just didn't happen. I can't explain why. I do think he's the number one head coach candidate moving forward, and it is something to consider. Is Sean McDermott going to elevate this defense this year, or should you keep Brian Daboll internally and maybe let Sean McDermott go, similar to the Falcons with Shanahan and Dan Quinn? Now, I think McDermott's a much better coach than Dan Quinn, and McDermott's done a great job for this culture. So I'm not saying they should do that, but if the defense stinks again and you're going to lose Brian Daboll, it's something to think about at least. But he's here for now, and his scheme is incredible. Does such a good job of getting this offense vertical, really capitalizing on Josh Allen's ability. And the other thing I like about what Daboll does is, I think, and I don't know if it's necessarily him or the O-line coach that's in place, but the way that he schemes up play action and prepares this offensive line to protect Josh Allen is phenomenal. This team had really nice pass protection last year, and they don't have great offensive linemen last year. A lot of it was just the preparation, the scheme, coming out and picking up blitzes and using play action to scheme up longer times to throw. So that's a big part of what Daboll does. Just a really good rhythm play caller as well. So I'm raving about Brian Daboll. He elevates this group, and they ultimately rank 4th offensively here. But we kind of knew that this offense was going to come in ranking really high. To me, if this team wants to be serious about winning a Super Bowl this year, which is certainly in the realms of possibility, it's got to be this defense improving, because this was not a good defense last year, and it did ultimately hold them back. So let's get into it, starting with the run defense. And, honestly, the Bills, by design, have a bad run defense. They rank 27th in the league, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about occasional teams, maybe the Browns and the Titans of the world, teams that they'll probably see in the playoffs, just running down their throat and neutralizing what the offense is able to do. I do think there are game scripts where that could happen, but part of that is by design here. This is a modern thinking team, and they look at the Chiefs in this conference and they say, we don't need to stop the run if we're going to beat the Chiefs. We just got to stop the pass. Now, unfortunately for the Bills, in that one game that was rainy, the Chiefs just said, okay, fine, we'll just run it down your throats because you can't stop us. They might have some upgrades here that could stop that game plan from happening specifically against the Chiefs. But overall, it's just not a very good run defense, and I think the Bills staff would tell you that's fine. We'll do what we can do here. Because most of these guys are more pass rush-oriented players. So you look at the interior, you do get Star Lotulelei back. Gap eater, allows Ed Oliver to slide back outside and not have to get as many double teams, but for the most part, just a gap eater with size. He's not a guy that blows a lot of plays up or is a huge threat in run defense. And then you have Ed Oliver next to him, who honestly, again, he's going to slide outside a little bit further, which might be able to, eliminate some of his weaknesses as a run defender, but he just might be the worst run defending defensive tackle in the NFL that gets like starting reps. He's 280 pounds and he plays like it. He's not Aaron Donald at 280 pounds. He's much more like Solomon Thomas at 280 pounds, which is not ideal, but you live with that because of what he does as a pass rusher, helping this team defend the pass. Then you go down the interior defensive line depth chart. Harrison Phillips, decent third. Vernon Butler, decent fourth. Outside of Phillips taking a huge step up here in his 18, 19, 24th season here, contract year could happen, but outside of that, you look at these guys, and the interior defensive line is frankly one of the worst run defending groups in the league. Then you go to the edge. This is such a dynamic, interesting edge group to talk about because I think some of the young players they have here are much better run defenders than these sort of pass rush focused veterans that they have in there. Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, no way around it. These guys just haven't been good run defenders for the last few years, and there's no reason to expect that to change next year. So maybe it's a world where you see Rousseau and Epinesa and Basham earlier on, and then Addison and Hughes come in for pass rushing downs. Maybe Hughes and Addison just lose their jobs. But that's usually not how it works. These are the starters, and for a team that is so worried about the pass, they're going to keep Addison and Hughes out there on 2nd and 7s where teams might run the ball down their throat because they view those two guys as their best pass rushers. So it does depend on how much foresight they have, how much development the young guys have here, and what they want to do. But I do expect it to be just like last year, where it's a lot of Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes getting beat off the ball and not containing the edge. But if you get Rousseau in there, super high upside run defender, Eric Armstead-esque physically speaking, his ability to shed blocks was insane, and he didn't get enough credit for it coming out. We'll continue to talk about Rousseau, who I love. AJ Epinesa, really nice run defender. You would think he'll rotate in there and not make that edge group such a liability. And really the same thing goes with Carlos Basham. All three of these guys are just, typically you would say oversized defensive ends who have really nice upside as run defenders. F.A. Abada is just a pass rush specialist, and I don't even know why they would keep anyone else around with how deep this group is. But then you look at the linebackers. You do have Tremaine Edmonds, who offers some size and thumping and old school mentality in there, but the consistency, whether it's picking the right spots or tackling, it just hasn't always been there with Tremaine Edmonds. We'll continue to talk a little bit about him when we get to the linebacker grade, but he does offer size and a physical force on the inside, probably their best presence in run defense. And then Matt Milano, it's more lackluster run defense by choice for the Bills. Matt Milano has a safeties mentality. He is not an old school linebacker at all. He does not tackle well. He does not thump really at a high level at all. He is a coverage oriented linebacker, and they're fine with it. And they're going to be in nickel a ton, so I don't even really list a third linebacker, but you got AJ Klein, who's a decent veteran. He'll play his role as that third linebacker in heavier packages. Dotson came in and played last year. Matakevich has never, taken that next step up from just being a decent backup. Andre Smith has some physical upside, but he's never reached it. Lee and Giles Harris, maybe practice squatters there. But this team really struggled to defend the run last year, and I don't think they did a ton to really overhaul that, and I don't think they really wanted to. There's going to be a lot of weeks where that's perfectly fine, and their offense is rolling, and they don't have to lean on their run defense because the other team also has to pass to keep up. But there's also potentially teams that are going to be able to take advantage of this, and it could be a shortcoming for this defense. But as you would hope, a team that's really focused on defending the pass, it does get better as you talk about their pass defense. So starting with the pass rush, they're going to rank 23rd here, and this is a really unconventional pass rush, maybe the most unconventional pass rush in the NFL. And that has to do with the fact that they have now drafted 3 almost hybrid defensive end types in Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, and Efe Obada. They have 2 legitimate edge starters in Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, who, for all we can tell now, are going to hold on to those starting jobs. And then you really only have 1 defensive tackle worth a damn getting after the quarterback. So to me, third down, I think it's almost always some sort of a NASCAR package where they are just lining up these defensive end types. And even Ed Oliver is a smaller guy, and they're going to try to scheme these guys open from a pass rushing perspective. So we kind of mentioned Addison, Hughes. I do expect them to still get a ton of reps. Now, they're both really getting up there in age, but they had decent years last year. You look at Jerry Hughes, I don't think he's going to be as good as he was last year. It's 65 pressures. I don't know how many sacks, but he was a low-end number 1 starter on the edge for this team. I just don't expect that from him. He's already kind of had a bit of a roller coaster career, and he's 33 years old. This team spent their first 2-round picks on edge rushers for a reason. But for now, he's out there. Does he keep the job throughout the year? I don't know. But then you have Mario Addison, who definitely, I would assume Bills fans don't really want him starting. I'd rather see what Epinesa and Basham and Rousseau can do. But Addison, again, had 45 pressures. He played like a number 2 guy last year. But getting up there in age, I do expect him to drop off. So you're at this kind of turning of the guard with these edge guys while also not having really anybody else on the interior other than Ed Oliver. So to me, that screams screw putting Harrison Phillips or Vernon Butler out there as long as it's a true, obvious passing down. And let's put Rousseau in there at 3 technique or 4-eye. Let's put Carlos Basham in there or AJ Epinesa and just cause problems for the opponent's offensive line. And I do think that's fascinating, and I could see a weird world where that works and turns into a really good pass rush, because when I look at Rousseau and I look at Basham and even Epinesa, I see Michael Bennett-esque 3 technique pass rushers or 4-eye inside the tackle pass rushers as guys that are edge rushers but have enough strength to slide inside, but rare quickness that guys inside just aren't used to handling. And especially in Gregory Rousseau's case, his best pressures were as a defensive tackle in those obvious pass rush downs. And hell, maybe Rousseau just puts on weight and becomes DeForest Buckner as a 6'7", super quick and lengthy interior rusher. I think he has the strength and frame to do that too. But I'm super intrigued by what they get from this combination, because we didn't even talk about Epinesa and Basham. It's because these guys are all like the same player. They're just doing the typical, Bean Carolina Panthers draft strategy where just keep throwing darts at your needs until something sticks. And that's what's going on here. So excited to see this group. How much of them do we see? When do we see them? That is a massive question mark for this pass rush, but the upside is there. And before we get to Ed Oliver here, I need to spend a little bit more time on Gregory Rousseau, because he was one of my favorite picks in the first round. And I felt like he was the prospect in this class that I felt like I was really going against the grain on the most. He was hated by almost every draft analyst out of there, pushing him into the second, third round. People said he has no athletic traits, and he's a bust waiting to happen. He has no pass rush moves, and his game won't translate to the next level. And I thought it was just ridiculous. He opted out, and that was his decision. He missed out on a second season where he could really show that next step in his game, and I think if he played, there would have been no conversation on if Gregory Rousseau belonged in the first round. Because when I watched his freshman tape, yes, he was raw, I agree, but the traits he showed led to more than just flashes. I thought there was an element of consistency to his game for a freshman. If you look at some of the best pass rushers to come out, they didn't have freshman years like Gregory Rousseau had. It's not that difficult to project the growth that you want to see from a guy like this. And I think there's a chance that the Bills stole a potential top 10 caliber player at the end of the first round. And there's really 3 traits with Gregory Rousseau that I think he can mold his game around. Number 1 is he has rare strength for a guy that looks as lengthy as he does. He was able to just throw tackles to the side as a freshman. He has that just raw core strength, real translatable strength at the position that he didn't get credit for. Second was his length, that I think for a pass rusher, a lot of people just don't always understand what that means and what it can do. Just at the most raw aspects of rushing the passer, if you're able to land a long arm or even a 2-arm bull rush inside a guy's chest, or sometimes inside that little collar piece, inside the V-neck of the shoulder pads, a lot of these guys have 33-inch arms, especially at guard, where if you're playing Rousseau inside more, he's going to see some of these guards with 32.5-inch, 33-inch arms. You get a 36.5-inch length with good technique, paired with my third trait, which is an underrated get-off, where Gregory Rousseau had the second best 10-yard split of any player in this draft, and a get-off that showed on tape. There's nothing any guard can do about that. And then all he needs to do is put together a couple rush moves for counters, and he could be DeForest Buckner-esque in a lot of different ways, because Buckner uses that same ridiculous length on the interior to his advantage. So he is a truly unique prospect, but I do think he was a steal, and he's one of the players I'm most excited to see develop, and I couldn't have imagined a much better spot for him to go. So an underrated prospect, got way too much hate, and the future upside is great for him. He is raw. He only played 1 year. I don't know how much he's going to give them in his first year, but I'm excited for Gregory Rousseau, and I feel very confident that that is a draft take that we're going to look back on 2-3 years, and something I can be proud of. We'll see if that happens, but that's out of the way. But then Ed Oliver, man, I want to like him so much more, but it's almost been a little bit disappointing with Ed Oliver. It's not that he's been a bad player. It's just been so inconsistently. It feels like he shows up 1 week and then he disappears for 2 weeks. And part of that could just be matchups, because he is such a light and quick interior piece, but he has almost no power to his game. So I don't know, man. I'm kind of done waiting on Ed Oliver to break out here after 2 years. It could absolutely still happen. But for now, I just see him as a good number 2 interior piece, and if that upside becomes realized, great. But I think counting on that at this point probably shouldn't be expected. So we've kind of talked in circles here, but that's a complicated pass rush. You kind of have to talk in circles with this group, because I don't think any of these guys play one specific spot. But just expect some crazy packages, maybe giving up some size and potential to give up some big runs on maybe 3rd and 6 or something like that. But for the most part, it's going to be a hybrid group that ranks 23rd for now with a ton of question marks, but some upside as well. Some of these young guys and maybe Ed Oliver show some of that growth here in 2021. But now into the linebackers, much more straightforward. You got your big-bodied middle linebacker in Tremaine Edmonds, and then you got your weak side Matt Milano coverage-oriented guy. Both these guys are good starters, not great, and that puts them at 11th for linebackers. I will say Tremaine Edmonds, same with Ed Oliver. I wish we could have seen a little bit more growth by now with him. Still a super young player and could get there, but feeling very Anthony Barr-esque at this point, in that he's a good player, and you're going to get some flashes with the traits that he has, certain flashes that'll get fans really excited about him. You'll see him with some of the tackles in space to the sidelines and some of his pass rushing ability and blitzing ability. It's exciting stuff. But from a consistency basis and the coverage aspect of his game, it just hasn't really grown to the point that I thought it would by now. So you're hoping that comes out, and maybe Edmonds and Oliver are kind of X factors for this defense as far as becoming a much better unit this year, but it's just difficult to project that right now. Matt Milano is what he is. Really nice coverage linebacker. They paid him. I love Matt Milano. Not a good run defender, but that's what you're getting there. And then the depth, as we kind of mentioned with the run defense portion, really not a whole lot of guys to get excited about there. So they rank 11th at linebacker. It's a good group. And now we're on to the secondary, the defensive backs, where they rank 10th in the league. Their starting unit is really good, but they have a notable lack of depth here at both corner and safety. So you've got your starting five. Tre'Davious White, top 5 corner in the NFL. His team ran a ton of man coverage last year, and he had one of his best seasons, really thriving in that man coverage-oriented system. He's always a heady zone player, but he got to show off some of that quickness as well and ability to go man-to-man. Cornerback 2 and slot corner are just fine, like okay starters. Levi Wallace has slowly grown, but just hasn't really shown an aspect of consistency. He's been kind of on and off the field, fighting for starting jobs, an undrafted player. He's a good corner. I don't love him as my second corner, and I would say he's one of the worst cornerback 2s. But maybe that's not fair. There's some cornerback 1s that aren't as good as Levi Wallace that we've talked about, but he's just a average to below average cornerback 2. Teron Jackson, instinctive slot corner, still developing, a younger player. Really good at jumping routes and zone coverage, a good run defender. Man-to-man, I don't trust him quite yet, but good slot corner. And then your fourth corner is Dane Jackson, who I really liked, but he's a second-year, sixth-round pick without a lot of experience. If you have an injury and you got to go to Dane Jackson, I have no confidence that he can step in and give you starting caliber play. Jackson's still probably at the stage in his career where he should be your fifth or sixth corner. But he's quick and has some instincts, and I liked his game coming out. So maybe he surprises, but it's tough to count on that. Saron Neal's kind of a strong safety slot corner hybrid, can do some nice stuff, but not a high-end cover player that can, play every corner position. Rashad Wildgoose I didn't think was a draftable prospect. He's probably going to make this team as their sixth, because no one else here is really noteworthy other than Griffin, who I think was somehow the number 1 corner coming out, but he's just another overrated USC prospect. Terrible athleticism, never grew at USC. Number 1 corner coming out of high school, that was, by the way, but I saw almost nothing there. I think he strictly got drafted based on his rival's profile as a 5-star commit. The safety group, you have one of the best safety duos in the NFL with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Neither of these guys are elite athletes, but they're both former cornerbacks who can really run the coverages that they want to run here at the highest of levels, because they like cover 1 and they like cover 4. So when you go cover 4, these guys come down a little bit towards the box and they're almost half free safety, half slot corner. So that really allows them to have success, show off that agility and ability to flip their hips and convert those quarters coverages into man. But when they go cover 1, one of these guys has to come down and actually be a man-to-man cornerback, and one of them has to go high and play free safety. So it's a perfect scheme for these guys who are just kind of jack of all trades, master of none safeties, and built more like corners than safeties. So they move really well, and maybe not the most physical run defending styles, but again, that's the preference of this team, is to be coverage mind first. Then the safety depth is virtually non-existent. Jaquan Johnson, a 6th round pick in 2019. We haven't seen much from him. Luckily, these safeties have stayed healthy. Damar Hamlin, again, a 6th round pick, not a prospect I was particularly high on, did some nice things, a high IQ player, but just not someone you can count on. So the starting group is really nice. It gets them ranked 10th. Luckily, they were able to stay healthy last year, but if they have any of these guys go down, you are turning to replacement level, borderline practice squad caliber depth, and that is far from ideal. Now, maybe they can pick up veterans or wait to see who gets cut and all that stuff and add some bit of more reliable depth, but you're really leaning on like Dane Jackson, Jaquan Johnson, and Saron Neal to step in the event of injury. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. If you get an injury in that Bills secondary, I think it means more for this team than most teams in the league. So the defense ultimately comes out 18th. There's some real strengths here when it comes to coverage and some of the pieces they can do as a pass rush, but also Sean McDermott is, in theory, a really good defensive mind and coach. They rank 13th for defensive coaching. Now, to have a defensive-minded head coach, you need that guy to be a top 10 defensive coordinator, because especially when you have a Brian Dable there who is just waiting to be a head coach, this is very similar in some ways of the conversation to Atlanta when they let Kyle Shanahan go and kept Dan Quinn. Now, I think McDermott's a much better coach than Dan Quinn, especially from an organizational CEO culture building type. But it is, I think, something to keep on your radar and think about. If the Bills defense looks like it did last year, and you don't see some of these guys grow, if you don't see Edmonds and Oliver and Rousseau start to really develop under Sean McDermott, you might have some questions about, is Brian Daboll the head coach of the future for this team? They wouldn't do it because it's just not how the NFL thinks. But I don't know. I find that a very fascinating concept to think about. But back to the defense for next year. I do think Sean McDermott is a really good defensive coach, and he honestly elevates some of the stuff here because the roster itself is probably not a top 20 defense. So I am giving McDermott some of the benefit of the doubt and saying last year was a weird COVID season, and they're going to bounce back and get back to playing better defense here. But there's some serious concerns as well that we covered. So that ranks 18th, and I would just say, lastly here, they need to be a better defense than last year if they want to win a Super Bowl. Will 18th be enough? Probably not. You probably need to get closer to that top 10 range. It's in the cards, but they got a lot of work to do. The special teams here does rank 9th. That's part of McDermott in this group. Heath Farwell, the special teams coordinator. They got a young kicker in there in Tyler Bass, who looks like he's here to stay. They have a good kick returner in Isaiah McKenzie, good punter in Matt Hawk. This team in general just is a high-effort team. They will buy into the coverage aspect of special teams. So it's a good special teams unit. And then the culture for me ranks 3rd. And we talk about, McDermott and Daboll, and maybe you should try to keep Daboll here. I just really like Brian Daboll, but it's not that simple when Sean McDermott really is one of the best CEO culture-building coaches in the league. I'm not trying to speak down on McDermott. I'm really just talking up Brian Daboll because it would suck to lose him. And I think Bills fans agree with that sentiment here. But I'm not trying to take away what McDermott has brought to the table from a leadership, culture, player development aspect, where they've been one of the best teams in the league at both player development and earning the benefit of the doubt. Almost nobody believed in Josh Allen, and look what he became here in Buffalo, being kind of groomed here by this nice culture. And then the strengths and weaknesses here, you're looking at a really dynamic quarterback surrounded by excellent weaponry and a top-notch offensive coordinator in Brian Daboll. So you're going to get explosive high-end offense. And then you look at the defense, they do supposedly have a very good defensive coach that can develop some of the young talent that they have, and a good starting secondary, assuming they can stay healthy. Then you go to the weaknesses. They don't have much of a running game on either side of the ball. They are going to have to lean on passing the ball, and you might see them go against better pass defenses and not have much of a run game to boost that up. You look at the front seven and their ability to stop the run against some of these great running teams in this conference. Teams like the Browns, like the Titans, like I think the Patriots in this division will be this year. That could prove problematic. And then the secondary depth, if they have a single injury in that secondary, I do think they will have a severe weak link. So it's something to keep an eye on. But lastly, let's take a look at this team's schedule and talk about kind of my win total projection for this team. Their over-under is 11 wins, and that feels about right for me. I have them going just over at 12-5. It's not the easiest schedule in the world, but they should be favored in most of these games. Just to shorten things, I have them losing 5 of their tougher road games here, being at Miami, week 2, certainly winnable, at Kansas City, that'll be a fun game, at Tennessee, I mentioned their struggles with the run game, similarly with New Orleans, who I think has a really good run game there, could give this team fits, and then at New England as well, interdivision, great running team. You'll sense a theme there. But overall, going 12-5, and I think a team that doesn't see a ton of regression from last year, at least offensively, and then you hope that the defensive progression shows up, and this can go from, I don't know, what were they, 22nd defensively or worse last year, to hopefully, 15, 14, 11 might be nice, and then you go from real legit playoff team to okay, they can really win a Super Bowl. So to me, it does come down to this defense taking that step up. McDermott getting this team back under wraps. We didn't mention the home field either. I think I glossed over that, but it is an elite home field. Getting fans back should help as well, bring along some of these young players on defense. But that's really the name of the game here. I think they're a really good team. I think they're in the playoffs. I think they're contending for this division and contending for the Super Bowl, whether or not the defense steps up. But you get some of that growth from these guys on the defensive side of the ball, and the Bills can win the Super Bowl this year, and that's the expectations. So Bills fans, let me know what you thought. Drop a like down below, really helps me out. And I'm heading out of town for a bachelor party this weekend, so not going to get an upload until next Tuesday, and then we're really going to be cranking out this deep dive series kind of every other day. Content's really going to pick up here heading up to NFL kickoff here in a couple weeks. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace.